conversation. So when you think about that, and you drill it further down to party politics, you're only electing officials by a fourth of the voting population.
Oh, that's a good way to really salt it down. Wow.
So our stakes are so little.
Yes.
Our stakes are so little. That other 50%, right? That 50% that doesn't show up to the polls, those are the disenfranchised. Right?
Yes. That's it's a great way. I like the way you position that, because it's a great way to think about how we are impacting or under impacting elections all the time.
That's right.
So now, what is the strategy then, or maybe just defining these folks? How do we get to them?
So how we get to them is that we move a little away from the hyperpartisanship, because there's one thing that hyperpartisanship, there's hardly any agreement these days. There's just a really big tug of war about centered around ideologies. But there is one thing that most people can agree on bipartisanly, and that is that the establishment is broken.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so...
But they say the establishment is broken, but it's their fault.
That's right.
And then the other guys are saying the same thing.
That's right. But if you think about the fact that our stakes are so low, we have a government that kind of runs on its own, right? Yeah. And I don't know, are you familiar with the term neoliberalism?
Well, I've heard those two words separately, but not together. What does that mean?
That's really the ideology that our politics is centered around. And it's a term that not many people know, right? And it's a little frightening, because that is the ideology that rules the world. It basically means that competition is the driving force, right? And we see that all the time. It's competition is the driving force. It puts paramount the consumerism.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that competition, consumerism being at the root of our politics, right, creates this benefit for corporations and takes away from the people. So when you get a chance, if you just look at the term neoliberalism, it lost its name over the years. It became a part of our governing policy during the Jimmy Carter administration, and then solidified in the Ronald Reagan administration with tax cuts for the rich, doing away with labor unions. And this neoliberalism is a liberation for competition. So it's to liberate the corporations from having to have so many burdens.
Right.
Right?
But it's predicated on this notion of the trickle-down theory, which is inherently flawed because it never trickles down.
Never.
And the corporations, unfortunately, have legislated themselves into such powerful positions that they are now not only abusing workers, abusing environment.
That's right.
And they don't have any accountability in the truest sense that another human being does, because they are, so that you start getting my ire with that.
That's right. That's right. And it sparks ire for most. But because that term has vanished into the recesses,
it doesn't. But Nicole, let me ask you, because I'm a linguist. I like words. I love words.
That's right.
Those two words don't seem to make sense to me as and I could be missing something. But when I hear neoliberalism, it sounds to me like what I'm saying is that there's an ultra liberal party that believes in far left rhetoric, just like we have alt-right. It doesn't seem to match what you're saying, which is the fact that there's a corporate exploitation of this country that is so egregious that these guys should be on trial.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And the reason why the term does not resonate, because it really was taken away from our language. And the reason why it was taken away from the language is because what underlies. Everyone has a feeling of angst when they think about how corporations are able to unfairly take from our system and not contribute.
Right.
Right. So that term vanished for a reason, so that the practice could go forward without contest.
Yeah, that makes it. So they buried that sucker.
They buried that. So
Wow.
it's a term that was created in a convention or a meeting in Paris. World leaders get together. Okay, this was in the 1930s.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. See, it and that's probably why it's anachronistic, because it no longer has the same sort of applicable message, because liberalism has been redefined. When something comes into the lexicon of the language and it's been redefined as something else, you now have to rebrand that.
That's right.
That term is null and void.
That's right.
Because when you said neoliberal, immediately I had a whole different image.
Right, right.
And I would not, 2 + 2 would not equal 4 in that equation.
I mean, and for most it would not, but it is the ideology that rules the world. It was adapted by World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and so the world operates according to this ideology.
So okay, now you are getting to know me live on the air, but some others would say that some people retain water, and I just like information. That's why I like rolling with you. So I want our listeners to get a little bit of history and perspective on. Let's start with the corporation. Originally, and you'll be able to sort of add and fill into this. Originally, corporations, when they were started back, the 1600s into the 1700s, they started forming groups because groups needed to, let's say, build a house. So they got together to build that house, and they had like a temporary structure that we would call, it's a trust. These guys get together and they pool their money, et cetera, for their mutual benefit. But as time went on, corporations, and this is the part that is so profoundly egregious, and you might know what I'm about to say. The 14th Amendment, which was part of helping slaves to gain emancipation. Remember, slaves were not recognized as human beings.
That's right, yeah.
But to get this recognition, one of the amendments was that, we can recognize slaves as human. Well, what the corporations did was they actually lobbied so that they could be recognized.
Citizens
a corporation would be recognized as a human.
That's right. Citizens United.
Citizens, right. So now you've got this body.
That's right.
This ambiguous group of individuals that no longer have a moral conscience, that now have a financial bandwidth because they pooled their monies together. And now they are going to start lobbying politicians, changing policies, and gaining more power.
Yeah. How about let's go a step further? They held a meeting to write the policies, and they hand them over
to the politicians.
To the politicians, to the governing bodies.
Exactly.
So we're in this. They're in this thing big.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, that's the scary part. Is that once they hand over that information and corporate guys essentially implement it, now they are controlling policy. They are controlling governance. And they don't give a flying flip about the environment, which is egregious.
Yes.
But the reason it's really frustrating is because in the space of there's a few industries that are uber powerful. Food and drugs. Sure. Very, very powerful. Oh my gosh. That's and then you go into the auto industry and the tech industries. Yes. Right. Yeah. Now but these guys in the oil, in the auto sectors are literally destroying environments.
Of course, yeah.
And then in the food sector, they are destroying our health.
Oh yes.
Because everything is made as cheaply as it can be, with as many chemicals as they can use, and they just don't care.
Absolutely. This is, I said that I do anything to get the information across. Now, the term neoliberalism has fallen to the recesses, but there are some, politicians that speak about this. There were some folks that were running for the Democratic nomination, including Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren, who talked about these corporations and how we had to remove them from our political processes. But, getting down to a more colloquial thing, we accept that they give us these low wage jobs and they take so much. And I said, we just accept it as the thing, right?
Yeah.
But I said, if it was more like something in real life, right? If someone walked up on the street and said, with a gun and said, "Give me your air," right? What would you say?
Suck in your last breath,
right?
And then hold it.
That's right. Or give me your clean water.
Yeah.
You would say you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
Right? Give me your infrastructure.
Yeah.
You would say you are out of your mind. But what we have traded for this ideology, right, that the trickle down effect, that this competition, right, is going to be the thing that sets the market, and the market is going to regulate. It turns us all to consumers.
Yes.
It turns citizens into consumers.
Yes.
And so we are so far behind it when it comes to interest, right? We're dead last. We're behind the corporate interest. We're behind the special interest, and then we get to the people's interest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're spot on. But as I'm listening to you, a thought that I have related to this is that the other side of this equation is that these corporations are also sponsors in advertising. Mm-hmm. Therefore, influencers of content.
Absolutely.
Therefore, masters of distraction.
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, I was driving in this morning listening to different shows, and they're like, "Oh, sports is back." It's like, yeah, all right. Well, it's back, relatively speaking. Yeah. Everybody's excited about it.
That's right.
But it's Les Brown and I, great friends. He always says, be careful that you don't become victims of mass distraction.
Beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And a part of the problem is that in this corporate paradigm, if you keep us distracted and you keep the kids wanting the newest pair of tennis shoes and the older people wanting the latest cars, then you really and truly have done a number on society.
Absolutely. And so that's really what drives my passion for reaching the disenfranchised. Because if you think about those numbers that I gave you at the beginning, that half of the voting population, nearly half of the voting population's vote is suppressed by this hyperpartisanship.
Yeah.
Right? If you thought about that, if the disenfranchised were to vote, right, which represents half, and only the parties represent a fourth, there would be no contest.
Right.
Right? So there could be a people movement, right, if we engage the disenfranchised and got the people to move.
Yeah, you're right. And that could change everything.
But unfortunately, voter suppression is such a sneaky beast, because the partisan politics, you get people who say, shut up and vote, right? Well, you got these people that have all this angst, and they're saying the corporations aren't right, and these people have aided them, and these people have, done these things. But then you've got the partisan politics that say, don't worry about that.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about the marginalization. Don't worry about, all that's gone wrong.
Yes.
Right? Put on your blue glasses or put on your red glasses.
That's right. And just plow forward.
With
your party.
With your party.
Problem is that the parties aren't serving the people.
Well, because the ideology, remember, is the neoliberalism.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that's been
it's infiltrated both parties.
Absolutely. I mean, both parties operate under the same ideology.
Oh yeah, because if you ask me, Bush was down with the oil companies.
Absolutely.
But Obama had to have some blessings from insurance and pharma to do what he did. I mean, so it's heads of the same snake sometimes.
That's right, because it's the world's ideology. It's the world's ideology.
Yeah.
So it's the way, I mean, and going back to that number, it's like, thinking back in perspective, the voter turnout that we have in the U.S. ranks us 26th out of 32 of developed nations.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah, that's insane.
And it's absolutely insane, especially when we have a representative democracy.
Right.
Right? How are we represented if half of us don't speak?
Right. That's right. That's right. Well, and I'm hearing that it's about to really go down because they're picking up mailboxes from the streets.
Oh, good.
They are. When I heard that, and then I heard that the sorting machine that sorts 35,000 pieces of mail per hour is being taken out of Maine post office. What is the? I just heard this anecdotally. What is the rationale? How do you justify doing that? We know what the end result is supposed to accomplish, but how can one justify that? Defunding the post office.
You justify that with this idea that the market will take care. So let's just think about where we are right now in the pandemic and how we've been served. Okay, we've got unemployment numbers that have reached all-time highs. We've got folks being laid off left and right. But Jeff Bezos, right, has provided everything but air to breathe.
Right.
Becoming almost a trillionaire.
Yes.
In this time.
Yes.
Right. He's increased his land capacity by 50%. Well, he delivers. Right. So what happens next is you make the justification for privatization, and that's neoliberalism. Right.
Right.
You make the justification for privatization because you say, we've given it, you make them too big to fail. It's like the banks, right? You make them too big to fail. Jeff Bezos got $123 million tax rebate last. I didn't get a tax return.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I have to pay most often.
Yeah.
Okay? Mm-hmm. He got $123 million tax rebate, paid zero in taxes, and he uses our infrastructure on Sundays. Yeah. Not even our own post office uses our infrastructure on Sundays, right?
That's nuts. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where it's the whole concept of this ideology that lurks in the recesses pushes privatization of our institutions.
Yes.
Right? Yes. So just like SpaceX and Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. It just pushes privatization of all of our institutions, our schools, charter schools, school choice.
Right. Well, the problem there is that once these big corporate demagogues take over these various institutions, they are literally going to be manipulating everything.
Everything.
But then, I remember, and I grew up on the East Coast, but one of the most horrific experiences you could have was going to motor vehicle. You go to motor vehicle and it was government controlled, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like us going sometimes into a post office and the line's out the door and you got one clerk and they're drinking coffee in between every customer.
Right.
So there was that sense of competition. So I do see some rationale there, but I also see better management would have afforded that opportunity as well.
Well, I think, and you're right, and the competition is not the beast, right? The competition is not the beast. It's what happens when you put that as the ideology. Correct. Because then you have, again, these corporations that get to make the rules.
Yes.
Right? So they get to make the environmental rules, right? They get to make the rules for work weeks. They get to set the wages. They get to, set the environmental controls by the sheer weight of their power.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And so we find ourselves beholden to their interests.
So the conundrum is that politicians are basically being held captive by this as well.
That's right.
Because if a special interest is going to bankroll my election, obviously they're going to have an ask.
That's right.
And we all know that it's happening, but PAC groups, all of these things, it looks like we're in a situation now where our politicians are bought and paid for.
That's right.
And the people have to take back that power.
That's right.
I would start by not buying from some of those corporations that have those policies.
That's right.
You know, I remember this was back in the, I guess maybe 90s, but Kathy Lee Gifford, who was really popular at the time, did the morning show with Regis. She used to have this contract with Kmart, and they sold a bunch of her stuff. And then all of a sudden, the story came out how all these kids were being paid 7 cents a day. Right. And she was like, I'm so sorry, I didn't know, and on and on. And for a little while the cameras were there, everything was fine. Next thing you know, it went back to business as usual, and they slammed those kids even worse, the ones that reported them.
Right. I mean, and that happens. And that's why a people movement is so necessary. I mean, and you see the grassroots efforts that are taking place all over the country right now with the Black Lives Matter movement. You see how corporations have globbed onto it because they see the numbers of bodies in the streets.
Yes.
Right?
And they said, we need those corporate dollars to keep circulating.
They see dollar signs above the heads in the streets.
Yes.
And we have to know where we fit into all of this, into this equation, right? So that we can know how to leverage our power. And so that's why reaching out to the disenfranchised sometimes requires an unmarrying of party. You know, you'll go and cast a ballot for a particular party because the whole idea, because parties aren't constitutional, we know they aren't constitutional, but they were introduced so that we could avoid factions. We're not doing so well on that. So that we could avoid factions and so that we could have some kind of comedy, right? So that we could find common interests. Well, that's not happening. We use them as, weapons to beat each other to the polls. And in the meantime, we're totally ignoring our fellow citizens who could help us change the core.
Exactly. Well, I think as I'm listening to you, part of me is excited because you are bringing such a poignant and very important issue to the forum that I think is oft ignored. But in addition to that, my frustration is that you're also articulating a huge problem for us. And I would love to continue to have an independent voice and not be owned and bought and paid for by a corporation. And I'm sure all Americans feel that way. So I am excited about Dearly Disenfranchised.
That's right. Dearly Disenfranchised.
On the Morning Edge.
That's right.
Every Monday at 8:30 a.m. We're gonna have the wonderful Nicole Lynn Gray, Esquire.
That's right.
Esquire.
That's right.
Yeah,
always.
The sharp minds. I love it. So, folks, you're listening to the Morning Edge here on the Edge Radio Network. We are broadcasting from our beautiful new studios downtown, midtown, actually, which is far more convenient because we have parking here.